everybody, wait a minute.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Hey, hey, hey. What's up, what's up, what's up, what's up? Welcome to Saturday Dusk Live. Hold on, I'm gonna let that run for a minute. What's up, everybody? Welcome, welcome, welcome to our Mix What I Like Saturday Night Live right here on I Mix What I Like. I'm Jared Ball, your host. Got our special guest on his way, but in the interim, please do like, share, subscribe, support the channel, put this in your socials. Let folks know to join you this evening. We're gonna have a little bit of fun, a little bit of seriousness, but a little bit of fun. Let's see. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Please do check out today's Saturdays with Renee on Black Liberation Media, where we talked about Sky Full of Elephants and DC Joe Black. Thank you for reminding of the one of the few little errors, few little flaws, but they talking about DC and all going on in the DC area and musically and whatnot, and didn't say anything about the go-go. Yeah. Wait, what's this? Didn't see y'all 11:55, no warning, nothing could save us when he's on the mic. Didn't I see y'all at 11:55? I'm confused. But all right, so our special guest is here. Let me go ahead and welcome him, Dr. Orisanmi Burton, to the show again, to the platform. What's up, sir?
What's going on?
Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Thank you for joining us on this Saturday. Who said dusk? Saturday Dusk Live.
My pleasure.
No, it's good to see you. Folks, the link to more about Professor Burton is in the show description. Obviously, among other things, author of this instant classic, Tip of the Spear. Forgive my camera for not coming in more clearly. Please make sure you are deeply engaged in that work if you are not already. And Yeah, I look forward. So I know tonight we're not going to do anything serious with your work tonight. We're gonna reconvene another time for that.
I'm
But
at your disposal.
oh nah, man. We're gonna hang out a little bit. Although I keep saying it, and I honestly don't know. Let me just be honest with you. We can come back to it, but I was looking again at at chapter 4. The gender war section, and I don't know to what extent. I think I ask you this every time we talk now, but like, are people? I think what I want to say is people more competent with those related issues really need to get involved with this, and I hope they are. I always am reminded of my lack of competence in certainly the latest discussions around gender and sexuality, but something. You've done something just with that chapter alone that I think is powerful. It's disturbing. It's so, but yeah. So I don't have a particular question unless if I don't know, are people engaging with you on that chapter in particular as you continue to make the rounds? And
I mean, when I do my talks and stuff, people ask me about it for sure. And I usually give the caveat that it's hard to talk about, not only because of the subject matter, but I mean, because of the subject matter and because of the level of, complexity, specificity. Like I have to, be really careful about what words to use, how to use them. And it can be hard to reproduce that level of care in the moment in terms of trying to really make sure that I'm conveying what it is that I mean, because there's a lot there that could be misunderstood. And I think it could be easily misread in particular kinds of ways. So yeah, people have asked me about it, but I haven't really been pulled into any substantive engagement on that front yet. But I imagine, there's time. We'll see.
Yeah. I'm confident it'll happen, and I'm even confident that I'll have something more meaningful to ask at least at some point, as I continue to grapple with all that you've done. But thanks again for that work. So I told you I have like a loose. I got a couple things on buying power. I definitely wanted to rap with you about this EdwardSaid review of Francis Stoner Saunders' work. But you had raised a couple of things in our text exchange. So I don't know, maybe we should start with some of that. Or should we maybe I'll start with let me start with the silly stuff, and maybe we get to that as more people
and then
show
maybe
up.
and then maybe Said, because that puts us at the Cold War, and I think a lot of the other stuff will follow logically from that.
All right, cool, right on. What's up, Poncho? No mama and no mama's biscuits. Yeah, no. How could have you read this book or heard any discussion of Sky Full of Elephants? Or
Sky Full of
Sky
Elephants?
Full of Elephants.
Mm-mm.
It's a new book by Sibo Campbell, his first bit of his first novel. And Renee and I talked about it today on her show. And the short of it is, it starts with an event of all white people in the United States walking themselves into bodies of water and killing themselves. And the main character, Charlie, is a brother who is locked up in prison at the time of this event. And because of this event, he and others leave. They're no longer imprisoned. And he takes a job at Howard University teaching what is engineering, I guess, was what he, because he could build and was competent.
Wait, is the university, like, does it resemble universities now? It's the
sort
same
of.
kind of
So that was one of my other little.
All the white people walk into the ocean.
Yeah,
and then But the institutions stay the same. It's still...
Well, yes and no. So again, one of my slight criticisms of the book was that I got fascinated by these questions as opposed to just the story itself. So I think there's a lot more that could have been done with world building and explaining to us what did and didn't. But yeah, Howard University and other institutions do survive in a form and take on a kind of function, and HBCUs take on sort of a heightened role, which was both inspiring and terrifying at the same time.
Yes.
But then Charlie ends up finding out that this white woman he had a fling with and fell in love with, I don't want to just dismiss it, resulted in a child that he didn't know about or get to engage. He knew about, but then the mother sets him up.
So, but wait, what's the deal with the mixed folks? Do they have to make a choice? Like, are they feeling the urge to walk into the ocean?
So that's a little bit dealt with too. So there is a little bit of that. And then she, who has her own she's raised with her white mother and stepfather and his sons who are racist. And so she's raised in an all-white environment. And when they go walking into the river, she tries to save them and then wishes she could drown with them, but she doesn't. She's not really clear what's going on. And then she finds a letter that says, some of us are still here. So she thinks some whites survived, and she's on a trek and enlists her father to help her get to the trek to find out where these white folks are. And it turns out that they're not white per se. They all have some drop of blackness in them. Some of them want the white ideal. Some of them are on different points of the continuum. And then she has her own sort of Black awakening. And the one thing I don't think that Renee and I really hit hard enough today was the fact that the book is pointing out that they have a line in there that Black consciousness arrives like a sky full of elephants. And they play on the metaphor a little bit more, but it's also her Black consciousness awakening of sorts too. Okay. So I mean, but because it was also it starts off with this DC centric thing, and they don't mention Go-Go. I had and No Mama's Biscuits, as Pancho was reminding us. Like, how dare they?
Well, the premise is ill.
That was my point.
You had me at hello.
That's what I said. And, I was like, the premise wins. That was my first note. The premise wins. Like it's. And then I was talking. We talked a little bit about it triggered some things with me and raised some questions. And I admitted I had some things I hadn't maybe got some latent issues I got to deal with. And even the question of when you're told in the novel what is the cause of this, and then there's a discussion, and this character Sailor, which I said earlier, and again, spoiler alert if anybody's tuning in here and didn't see Renee's show, that Sailor is like Killmonger and has this little speech where because the question is like this indiscriminate killing of whites and what others might go with them and and he's basically in a much more well-written way says the trauma they caused deserves some payment. Like they got to suffer. And I don't care if it's an imperfect culling or whatever you want to call it. And I was like, I'm with that. I felt that. So anyway, it's
I mean, is that character because Killmonger ultimately is pathologized in Black Panther, right? So he has no self-control, right? So there's that, right? But then you can't take that claim that he makes in the film seriously, because later on he does that assault against the elders in his own community in the temple, right?
Exactly.
Which then is a gesture to delegitimize that whole claim. So and that's always what happens in these films and products. So I'm wondering, how is this figure as a character, a narrator in the book?
It's not as central a character, but also not done that way either. Like there's nothing like that done to him. He's not pathologized in that way. Not that I would have caught. No. Mm-hmm. I thought, Andre, I thought it was Sailor, because in my note I wrote it down as Sailor. Don't tell me I wrote it down. I misattributed that speech, because I was actually liking the play on him being, a sailor with my little former Navy thing happening. I kind of liked that attitude. But you might be right. Damn. Oh man, are you? Did I have that wrong? Oh man, Andre, you might be right. That's my bad. Well, whoever gave that speech, I'm with them. I mean, Joshua, yeah, it was a kick the dog moment, but these elders had betrayed and abandoned him. I mean,
the white author too. It's a white woman.
Who?
Heather A. Clark, right?
No.
Right? No.
For what?
Elephants in the Sky?
No. Sky Full of Elephants. It's Sky Full of Elephants.
I said Elephants in the Sky.
I don't know what that book is. So that's different. No, I don't. Okay, that's deep. Cool. Yeah, I don't know. That might be.
We gotta. We gotta unpack some of this. Okay, Sky Full of Elephants.
Yeah, Sky Full of Elephants. Yeah. But that's deep though. There's elephants in the sky, huh? That's interesting. I wonder what that's all about.
Not this.
Yeah. So, but Joshua, I think it's not that you don't have a point about how the elders treated him, but I think as I understood what Ori was saying, certainly how I took it is it doesn't matter. Once audiences see the act, they're not going to step back and have the well. It's the same thing I was saying about the second film. Once you see Angela Bassett get killed, people have a visceral reaction. They're not going to think anymore about the logic behind it. They're just like, how dare you?
Well, instead of saying, okay, here's a calculated, thoughtful, very militant person thinking about violence strategically, and you may disagree with his conclusion, you're left with, once he does that to the elders in the temple, you're left with, oh, he's just a violent person.
Right. That's right. All right. So let's see where. Now I'm not even sure what I was doing with this thing here. Let me see something. So all right, let me pull up a couple of whatchamacallits here. But this one, you know what? I'm just gonna have to look at this one with everybody. I didn't actually prepare this one like I thought I had. So, well, one of the stories here from Adweek about the Super Bowl was that so many white men appeared in Super Bowl ads. So it was a very white male-dominated Super Bowl, which I didn't notice because I didn't pay much attention to it. But it said here, overall, the share of light-skinned actors in this year's lineup of national big game spots was 69%, up from 62% in 2023. Where recent figures from the U.S. Census Bureau show white non-Hispanic people accounting for 58% of the population, they got 69%. Although it says light skin, so I don't know how they're rating it. Are they saying, are there any light skinned Latinos that they're counting in this? I guess not in here, but where they do mention this point here, ignoring high spending consumer segments, especially Black, Hispanic, and Asian American audiences whose collective buying power will soon exceed $5 trillion isn't just an oversight, it's bad business. Well, they keep saying that, but, and again, just to show the methodology, it's again the Selig Center that they're referring to as a source for the claim. But between this and what Renee talked about this week and last, and then what I even saw before the show today, the FCC is and its new leadership is suing Comcast and for continuing DEI initiatives. And Renee's point about Target being sued by its stockholders for not telling them how much the backlash against DEI was going to hurt their bottom line. I'm not really sure to what extent the corporate world is that concerned with this buying power of the so-called world majority or the so-called minority community, in part because people don't have anywhere else to go. And as I'm going to show in this other story, it's becoming a beef between Black consumers and entrepreneurs. So anyway, I just thought that one was.
Yeah, no, the Target thing is wild. I still want you to have on that person who wrote that article about Target's support for that sort of counterinsurgency effort supported by that professor, that Black professor at Harvard Business School, Andrew Oftelli. Do you remember that? I sent you that.
You did, and I'm just now remembering that you did that. I got my bad. That's
that's all right. Good. I mean, it's just it's interesting because Target, on the one hand, has this really robust, apparently, according to them, DEI infrastructure, but on the other hand, they've been working very closely with like the different police unions and police foundation to bolster the capacity of the police to repress people. So this is always sort of the modus operandi, which is to kind of like play both sides.
I got to give her credit on that again. Renee showed today how that was one of the points, that the people leading the charge against Target for not telling them the damage that their engagement with DEI, because remember initially the DEI thing, there was that white backlash. And so the stockholders are saying, you didn't tell us that there was going to be this backlash that was going to hurt our bottom line. And one of the main perpetrators of that is the police pension union, pension fund.
That's wild.
Who are saying, Target, you didn't tell us. You were going to put up some rainbows, and then we were going to lose customers, and our audience was going to go away. And now we're gonna sue you. Yeah, there you go, Silberg, right on time. They're putting a target on our backs. Well done. Yeah. So really, and the point really that I was going to get to is that for all of the claims that among the Sharpton and Jamal Bryant types that there should be a boycott, a Black-led boycott of these folks, those companies are being targeted by their white affluent supporters, stockholders, for doing it. So the Black folks that want to come in and say our buying power should be respected, the white folks with money is saying, no. The police pension fund needs to be respected. So that seems to be what their primary concern is going to be that. And then, if you can calculate all of the buying power of all of the so-called minority communities together, and even if you accept that logic, it still doesn't amount to whatever would be the buying power of the white community. So and then, of course, you could even segment it out to the LGBTQ community that is said to have a 1 point whatever trillion dollars in buying power at this point. So, and that encompasses a variety of backgrounds and racial groups. So the idea that all of these groups are going to work in unison to boycott all together is,
man, I think about where I live in Southeast DC. It's like we got a Target 2 miles from our house. That's like, if we didn't go there, I'm like, where would we go? Like, for real, like, where would we go to get what we need? Like, we could do Amazon, but like, presumably we would want to boycott that as well.
I mean, theoretically, they're on the list too. Which is, again, sort of my point. Like, and then if you wanted, I think that there are some Black-owned toilet paper providers and toothpaste providers. You could find these outlets. I don't know to what extent they would be able to make it to you. And then if everyone did that, they would go out of business. They wouldn't even be able to satisfy the supply. So I'm not really sure what is expected here. Did you get this text? So a buddy of mine sent me a long text. So see, DC Joe, Dr. Burton has a more...
Please, Ori, please.
Well, the joke works better if I call you Dr. Burton here.
All right,
Dr. Burton here has a higher political class of friends than I do. So he wouldn't...
If that's true, but thank you.
I'm just assuming. Because my buddy is the one who sent me this text, this long text that was saying the DEI boycott plans first starts with following Sharpton's leadership.
Yes.
And then it goes into this long...
I'm talking about, let's do it.
Yeah. So we're going to follow Sharpton's leadership. There's a 24-hour blackout that's being scheduled for the 28th of February from midnight to midnight. No Amazon, no Walmart, no Best Buy, no McDonald's, no gas, no major retailers, no credit cards.
And the demands are...
why this matters?
Don't dismantle DEI. Is that the demand? Don't dismantle DEI. Like what?
So it could be argued that I'm reading it quickly and with a lack of seriousness and missing it, but there is no subheading that says demands.
Black buying power matters.
What you can do if necessary, only buy essentials, spread the word. Why this matters: corporations and banks only care about their bottom line. If we disrupt the economy for just one day, it sends a powerful message. If they don't listen, we make the next blackout longer. This is our first action. Our numbers are powerful. This is how we make history. We must send an economic message. That's it. There's no set of demands. So there's no...
Black buying power matters.
Black buying power matters. And then after one day where it's already been expressed that this is the definitive length of the boycott without a specific demand attached, I don't know. But as this story says, the boycott campaign fuels tension in the Scanner. This is the Scanner, Portland and Seattle. A boycott campaign fuels tension between Black shoppers and Black-owned brands, evoking the long struggle for consumer citizenship. And again, a lot of the same. Target hasn't said that it will hasn't said what the change will mean for many of the Black entrepreneurs who sell everything from coffee to sunscreen on its shelves. I should read his part at least. It all started late last month when the retailer announced that as Target that it was ending its diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. The move drew widespread rebuke from social justice organizers, including New Birth Missionary Baptist Church Pastor Dr. Jamal Bryant. Although Target said one of its racial equity initiatives had already been scheduled to conclude, the timing was notable. The move came just days after the White House called for federal DEI ban, and several other companies took similar actions. So they've changed their name from their diversity supplier name to supplier engagement. They don't know what this is going to mean for the Black entrepreneurs who sell everything from coffee to sunscreen. And again, I think it's important to note that it is coffee to sunscreen because these are the sectors of the economy where Black entrepreneurs and small businesses are allowed to exist. As we've talked about before, Tabitha Brown, whose products can be found in various aisles from books to cooking appliances, asked consumers to reconsider boycotting Target. Without holding their dollars, Brown insisted... Withholding their dollars, Brown insisted, will hurt Black businesses far more than the corporations that sell their products. That's true. So why would a Black business owner ask consumers to patronize a retailer that signaled it doesn't care about Black customers? And how did something as mundane as where people buy toilet paper and shampoo become a litmus test for a racial consciousness in the first place? Well, interestingly, and this is written by Professor, and I did look up and I bought her book, so I'm going to be reading her book, Tamika T. Tamika N. Townsell, who is an associate professor of Black Studies in Communication at the University of Washington. And I hope this isn't a typo, by the way. I think this is a fascinating. She created like a field for herself there. Is that like a special appointment? That sounds pretty interesting. But as she notes, what is of interest to me in this is that, well, one of them is that she makes the point that most of the nation's biggest household brands didn't begin to take African-American consumers seriously until after World War II. And as I keep wanting to talk more and more about here, part of the reason for that, of course, is because this is part of the broader geopolitical context. This is about resituating, and as the authors of The Big Myth talk about, the National Association of Manufacturers, the white corporate world, saying we wanted to reconquer America and take people away from what they had learned during the war, that unionization and government intervention in the economy could have some value and be a benefit. So NAM got in there and said, no, it's not. And got busy in manipulating that. Then, of course, as we talk a lot about the this is what I was looking for. That's what I was looking for. There we go. Let me get that out the way. Let's get us both out the way a little bit, if I can. All right, never mind. Anyway, but this is when John H. Johnson does Selling the Negro and starts talking about the importance of buying power and having the Black consumer become seen as a good American citizen. So of course this is all, but this is again part of the where I end up struggling. And I haven't read her work yet, but as she talks about in here, and as I do want to play a little bit of this Burrell interview, they frame it as this becomes a positive moment where Black businesses and advertisers and symbolic inclusion can start to have a positive role in helping the Black community. And then, so that's probably where we disagree. But where I think we overlap with some agreement is in how she does talk about this post-Second World War moment, and then talks about how the corporate world wanted to intervene in Black liberation through advertising and Black capitalism. So she comes back to that point. So we overlap there. I think where we end up separating is where she and others go into this positive, the sort of positive spin as they talk about here, where African-American business owners often possess a cultural consciousness that distinguishes their brands even when they can't match the resources of larger competitors. And then she also talks about a little bit of the history of developing these campaigns where people like Jesse Jackson and now Al Sharpton will try to marshal the so-called buying power of Black consumers to get some sort of, as we were just asking, maybe abstract demand in return. But yeah, so she did write this book. This is the book I got. I don't know if did this switch with us? Yeah. So I'm going to read this and come back to it. But she wrote this book a few years ago, Branding Black Womanhood, Media Citizenship from Black Power to Black Girl Magic. And I suspect there will be some disagreement, but I'm still very interested in what she does there in telling some of that history. So I did want to pull up a clip there, but Ori, is there anything you would want to jump in with, since I've just been rambling there for a few minutes?
No, man,
Okay.
it's all pretty. It seems pretty grim to me.
That's a way of putting it. So speaking of which, the grim theme. So TomBurrell, who I think I've mistakenly questioned where if he was even still alive. He is still alive, 85, I think. one of the so-called founding fathers of Black advertising. And I did just want to play a few minutes of this interview that is in Professor Townsell, is that her article there, that I think, I don't know, I keep thinking it's pretty revealing, but let's pick up a little bit here.
March in Mississippi called the Meredith March. This was James Meredith, who had integrated the University of Mississippi. And in the midst of that march, there came a voice, and that voice said, "Black power, Black power."
We want Black power. We want Black power.
What it suggested, or what it said actually, was that you can maintain your difference, your identity, your culture, and still be equal. Black power, Black is beautiful, all of the symbolism that went with that, interestingly, spawned the concept of Black business. The one unique thing about Black people is that they came to this country like no other group of people, primarily against our will and in bondage and going through a level of suffering that nobody else had to go through. And out of that came a set of attitudes and actions that manifested themselves in marketplace behavior. I had amassed
All right, so I'm going to stop it there. I think so you can see what happens with the frame of these things. It gets framed as we were prepared to do good business and we just needed the ability to show this new wave of white capitalists that we could do good business. And then, as I've talked about before, and we'll come back to at some other point, Ray Kroc meets with, you know what, I gotta play I gotta bring that back, that one part back, because they don't say it this way, but we know the history, at least now around here, that Ray Kroc meets with Nixon. Nixon says to Ray Kroc of McDonald's, we need some Black folks to be involved with business, and Ray Kroc hires TomBurrell. And explicitly the attitude was what Nixon told Ray Kroc was, well, Ray Kroc told Nixon, well, the way it ended up working out was that the whoever told it to whoever was, white folks, owners of McDonald's, don't want to go into Black communities to collect even the receipts and the money. So let's sell some of these franchises to Black owners and get some Black people involved. McDonald's has a relationship with Coca-Cola. So here comes TomBurrell. Now, it's framed from that perspective as an anti-Black liberationist, Black power message. Here, Burrell is rebranding Black power as Black entrepreneurialism and saying, and here's the result.
partner,
Here's the
McDonald's
result.
Corporation.
At McDonald's, we do it all for you. You're the one. You're the one.
Soon as I turn the keys,
Daddy's home.
my kid is waiting for me. I've been working nights all week and my kids in school all day. But day
Do you recognize this boy?
We'll go to
Anybody
the
recognize
park
him?
to play.
Stop by McDonald's before the morning's through.
Fillet of fish, Big Mac for me, and some French fries too. Well, my son thinks McDonald's
See?
is the greatest place in town. The food is good, the price is low. They're good to have around.
At McDonald's,
Well, it's kind of revolutionary when you think about the fact that all through the 50s and much of the 60s, Black people never saw themselves portrayed.
So that's okay. So that's where the switch is. So Black power becomes seeing Black people portrayed in a positive way in McDonald's commercials, and then we see Todd Bridges in the early start to his career. That was Willis, and then this is said to be revolutionary. And on the one hand, I get it. everybody wants to be seen positively, but I think that's the trick bag that we get caught up in. Calvin was later. So this is the generation before Calvin, at least one generation before Calvin. Calvin comes up later. And I think that was Lou Rawls. I think that at least sounded
trying
like
to figure out who that was.
Yeah, that's at least sounded like him. So so again, you got Lou Rawls singing, you got Todd Bridges acting.
He was also singing like a script. It was so descriptive. It sounded like they literally wrote a script for dialogue, and they were like, "Oh, let's just get Lou Rawls to just sing it."
It would sound better if that's right. Daddy comes home from work. Yeah, that's no, that's it. That's it. Oh man. So but then it gets rebranded as this revolutionary act. And I think that's part of the problem still to this day, like the being seen in something that's not overtly negative. So that was
revolutionary in the context of marketing American products under capitalism, right?
There you go.
Like small R revolutionary, right? But not revolutionary in terms of like transforming redistributing wealth and transforming how we produce wealth and these kinds of things.
No, right on.
And racial hierarchy and these kinds of things. So I think that's often, where these sort of problems pop up in the way that people just use that term. I try to use that term very sparingly to sort of shield it from the constant drive to co-opt it and use it to just describe incremental new developments within, various spheres of capitalist reproduction, So like, anyway, whatever. I noticed he wrote a book. I saw this book on the shelves. I've never read it. It's called Brainwashed. TomBurrell, Brainwashed, Challenging the Myth of Black Inferiority. I remember seeing that everywhere, but I never picked it up.
So I have more than I have more than I should. I have more than I'm supposed to know. And I'm gonna have to leave it there. But I'm familiar with the work, and years ago when it was being produced, I remember seeing it and it did. This was I didn't know what to do with it at the time, and I should probably revisit it. But what it does it's an extended version of what we see even in these clips, where a lot of that language is used, a lot of that approach is used. So if you're not reading it with a certain critical eye, it comes across as something very pro-Black, very progressive, very advanced in its politics. But because it does a lot of that switching of that rebranding of Black liberationist language in a very commercial.
No, it's interesting. I mean, I think I know we're probably going to talk some about the CIA later, but brainwash, the term brainwash was put in circulation by a CIA journalist named Edward Hunter. Who wrote a book called Brainwashing. He wrote a whole bunch of other books, but the whole point was to raise alarm in the US about the possibility that the Chinese and the Soviets had cracked the secrets of the human mind. And so he developed this term brainwash so that it could sort of, and it circulated widely. And so people use that term now as if it's an actual descriptive term, but from the outset, it was a sort of propaganda mechanism designed to, raise, continue to heighten fears around, communist insurgency, while also acting as a cover to legitimize the CIA's own research into, mind control, whatever, behavior modification, all these things, right? So this is an example of how, intelligence agencies and CIA are shaping language, and how this stuff takes on a life of its own. And so now we use the term, this person is using the term brainwashing to describe what's being done, to Black people. But the very term that he's using is in fact a product of a psychological warfare to shape our perception. The CIA put that term into circulation as anti-communist psychological warfare.
So I know that analysis is not in the book. So that part is not there. And if, yeah, so but now I'm definitely going to go back and get the book again. Because it's been like 20 some years.
You can get a PDF. A PDF pops up pretty easily.
Yeah.
I did a word search. Edward Hunter does not come up.
No. That analysis is not part of that book. If anything, it would be, unless he was trying to say that somehow this got turned into something good for Black people. It's like that's at least how I remember it. I got to go back, but now I'm definitely going to look back at it. And especially since Burrell, I honestly thought he was. My apologies to him and his loved ones. I had sent him to the great beyond in my mind already. I didn't even know he was still alive. So I'm gonna. But his name keeps coming up in all this work that I'm looking at. Yeah. And yeah. so I'm gonna go back and check it out. Yeah, it's wild out here in these academic and publishing streets. So, but that analysis was not in there for sure. So we'll definitely have to yeah. All right. So yeah, thank you for that. All right, so that's it. I got to that. So, okay, so this is just a random not necessarily a non sequitur, but I didn't really mean for this to be anything. I mentioned the other day, I mentioned all the time, this Rockefeller line that competition is a sin. And in talking about all the techno-feudalism and all this, and Peter Thiel, this actually came.
Peter Thiel's a techno-fascist, homie.
Oh, so perfectly said, and
if
so
you're starting
here
a
he
company,
is.
If you're the founder,
Why he got a
entrepreneur
hoodie
starting
on
a
like
company,
me? I don't like
you
that.
always.
Because he's with
Have
the
you
people,
seen
man.
that? Yo, he did a talk a couple of months ago at George Washington. I think it was at George Washington.
Oh,
And
no.
the talk was dedicated towards revisiting the thought of Carl Schmitt. For folks who don't know, Carl Schmitt was a German jurist and a member of the Nazi Party, who was anti-liberal, as am I, but he's anti-liberal from the right. He's saying liberalism doesn't work because fascism is better. And Thiel loves this guy. So the whole thing is about why we need to revisit Schmitt, and why, and this is not a direct quote, but an accurate paraphrase, why we need to use Schmitt to start asking questions that are outside of the Overton window, right?
That's right. I've heard
and
him.
And this conversation was endorsed by a major university.
Yeah, that's all very right on. Exactly. Damn. So
if you're starting a company, if you're the founder, entrepreneur starting a company, you always want to aim for monopoly, and you want to always avoid competition. And so, hence, competition is for losers.
And that's from a recent Ben Norton story about AI and DeepSeek. It's very interesting, the Chinese AI company and all of this. And it's all a very interesting story. But I just saw that he makes a reference to this from Peter Thiel, and then goes back to the origins of that sort of Peter Thielian thought process. And without mentioning the Schmitt guy, it's all has that. It's basically Yeah, the same thing.
Yeah. They're trying to, monopoly capital, and which, as George said, is like that's the origins of fascism in the 20th century.
That's
it
right.
Grows out of monopoly capital and the need to crush all opposition and all forms of oppositional consciousness.
That's right. That's right. And so I've reached out to him again, Barrett Brown, because the way, to talk about Peter Thiel again. And there's been, did you know last year and the year before, there were 2 movies that came out about about Reality Winner?
No,
which I didn't know that. So I watched one of them. I'm going to watch the other one, and that's going to be the basis of this discussion we have with Barrett Brown. But Reality Winner, for people who don't remember, was another one like a post Ed Snowden, a woman version of Ed Snowden, so to speak, an Air Force who was doing drone strikes, and then she gave over classified information and got locked up for it.
And from my understanding, part of why she got locked up for it was because the Intercept did not properly protect her, right?
So the movie doesn't. So I think that. So that's why I want to talk to Barrett again and go back to what he was saying about it, because he knows that full story. The movie doesn't depict it that way. The movie depicts the Intercept, the one I saw at least. The Intercept is more of like the friendly, heroic. I got the story to the Intercept and that. But and then she gets arrested, but they don't really explain or show how the Intercept did any kind of thing, anything dirty. So that part of the story I don't remember.
I mean, I don't know if it was dirt or
just not insufficient. Yeah,
whatever. But yeah, that's my understanding. But I haven't been following it too closely. I'd definitely like to see that though.
Yeah, the movie. I mean, the movie, as a movie goes, it was entertaining. I don't vouch for its history, and I remember that Brown had a lot of criticism of the Intercept and Glenn Greenwald in particular, who's named in this movie. And I thought he had
the
some
founder,
Pierre Omidyar. Yeah, all of them, absolutely. But none of that becomes the focus. It just is, at least in this one movie, I got to see the other one. I didn't even know there was a second. Well, this was actually the second one. The first one, we'll have to see if they get into that. They didn't keep her cover, says Ross DePina. That sounds about right. But so anyway, but my point was that what you've just said is the point that is what Brown also makes, that we're getting to the point where no one will even want to raise questions about having or making change because they won't think any is necessary or any is possible, won't know what questions to ask, and they're certainly trying to get us there for sure.
And just removing all of the different levers of intervention,
that's right.
The levers of short of violence, just
that's
removing all of the ways that one might attempt to remediate a problem.
And Ori, this was right? I think David is right here. Baran and Sweezy's Monopoly Capital was found in Jackson Cell. Yeah.
100%. Yep.
And I think, was that why I was trying to read? Because at one point I was supposed to be trying to read all the books that were found there, and I didn't get to them.
It's a noble endeavor. Yes. I want to do that too. I haven't done it.
It is a noble endeavor. Maybe one day. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that was all I had for so before we got to the EdwardSaid piece, and what you sent from this book about the Washington Post, which is just even 3 pages, I think was crazy. just crazy. Did you ask me this? Did you see the movie The Post? Did you watch that?
No, I need to. I want to. No, I want to. Does it get into that?
No, I don't think I ever. Somebody else, I think I told somebody recently I didn't watch it, but I think that's not exactly true. I think I started it and fell asleep on it. So whatever way, I didn't really watch it in a way that that I could really. So I would like to watch it again, and I would be very interested to see if and how they deal with any of that. But do you want to start there? Do you want to start with the Said piece? Let's start with Said. Okay. So I had never seen this before. And I'm not even sure, I don't even remember exactly how I got brought back to this piece. But somewhere in trying to just, move very slowly on this work I'm supposed to be doing, this came back up. So I always talk about Francis Stoner Saunders and the Cultural Cold War. And I'm kind of pissed at myself that I never saw this review from September of '99 from EdwardSaid titled "Hey Mister, you want dirty book," and it says here it's about a review of Who Paid the Piper, the CIA and the Cultural Cold War. This was the title of the book as it was released in Europe. In the United States, we got the Cultural Cold War as the initial part of the title, but it's all talking about the same book. Before I say anything else, is there anything about this that you would want to start us off focused on?
I didn't find, I mean, I've read the book multiple times. I love the book. I didn't find the review super helpful on its own. I mean, I like the responses at the end. That was hilarious. The one thing that I wanted to point out, though, was what he says on the third paragraph. Unfortunately, not all of her information is fully accurate or complete. Yeah. It is, for example, careless to place the artist Frank Stella in a traveling delegation of grown men when he would have been about 10 years old, and to quote from books without supplying page numbers of publication history. And I guess I wanted to point this out. I didn't know about this, but I think it's just, it points to how important it is for books that are making a radical critique of the structure to be rigorous. Like I tried to make Tip of the Spear super rigorous because I knew that it was going to piss a lot of people off and that they would want to come for it. And I wanted to make it really hard for them to do that. And so I think if this is true, I mean, if EdwardSaid is saying this in this review, it's probably true. That is a really easy way then for people to just dismiss all of it, right? And if you're coming with these arguments that you know are going to be controversial, you know people are going to come for you. And so just as for future reference for folks who are trying to do this work, like, yo, you got to cross all your T's and dot all your I's so that people just can't dismiss everything.
Exactly. So this is going to be, I'm doing way too much here, but because I wanted to use Safari, I had to switch all of my highlighting procedures, and this one didn't go well. But this was one of the, not only did I make a note of this, but I went and looked it up. And because I just wanted to confirm, first of all, because I agree with everything you just said. And in fact, I'm working with some students on a research project now, and I told them, I'm like, cite everything. Put everything in your footnote. You cannot go wrong by having an overly flooded footnote. That's my perspective on it, at least. Like,
if you do it right, you can do that wrong too.
Okay, fair enough. But I was like, at least err on that side. Don't leave room for anybody to be able to say. But I did look it up, and she does. So she lists Frank Stella on this group of traveling people, and then I went and looked up his age, and he was born in 38 or 36 or something, and she's got him on something in 1944. So he would have had to be like 8 years old producing this great work and then going on tour. So it's you're right. And the only other thing that I noted that I never paid attention to when it first came out is his point about what she doesn't do in terms of Israel and Palestine.
Yep.
That she says, and then I went and looked that up too. And in a book of it's I don't know, like 400 pages or some 300 some pages, Israel shows up, I think, like 5 times. It's very under discussed. So I thought the overlap there was and there was another thing that There was another one, but I think I've lost the. But there was something along those lines also. But initially, your point being that the point about the errors, I thought was a good one in this thing, this area where she doesn't get into much of. This was the part where he's saying something about. Oh man, damn.
What?
Because there was a part where he was making a similar point about Egypt and the African world being under discussed along with Israel. And he was giving an example. I thought this was it here about what she leaves out or could have considered in terms of the
I don't think I
so-called
fully understood that part. I didn't read it super closely.
All right. Maybe and it's not helping that I'm not, the CIA tactics kind of Saunders describes were often employed well beyond Europe. Yeah, that was the point. Creating the third world, and with it the tiers out of Monzisme, which in time became associated with the culture Kampf when versus Paul. Anyway, the point. But
I saw that and I was like, I should pay attention to that. But I was like, this is too much for me right now. So I didn't like culture conf and all that. I was like, I don't really know what that means.
Right. But let me just for folks, Saunders catches precisely the sublime confidence of former preppies and Ivy Leaguers who thought they were entitled to rule the world and whose ideas, if that's what they are, still pound excitingly through Madeleine Albright's feverish speeches about American indispensability and supremacy. That's the point. That's why I wanted to, because he's writing this in '99, but what Madeleine Albright represented then, we're seeing again in Trump and the brashness of his administration, that we saw a version of it with Madeleine Albright and the Bushes. But she should have gone into greater detail about the appearance of the quote three worlds concept, which was an essential part of the story she tells. More might have been made of the struggle between East and West over influential post-colonial countries like Ghana, Egypt, Indonesia, and India. CIA tactics of the kind Saunders describes were often employed well beyond Europe, creating the third world, and with it the culture and Montiers, whatever. But this idea that I liked how he puts it here, that this third world is something that white people created for their own purposes and their own exploitation. And she didn't catch that and ignored this whole thing about the non-aligned movement or underplayed it in her book. So I mean,
I highlighted the next paragraph, which is something I'm always interested in. The other subject she doesn't fully broach is directly entailed by what she digs up about the complicity between power and intellectuals. For a time during the 50s and 60s, entire disciplines, such as sociology, anthropology, area studies, and political science, as well as innocuous fields like languages and comparative literature, were heavily infiltrated by the American government for geopolitical ends. I mean, I might add that, American studies, which is understood to be, among the most left academic disciplines, the first academic discipline to support BDS, where me and you were supposed to do a book launch panel and others, was established by a guy named Norman Holmes Pearson, who was a counterintelligence specialist with the OSS, and he actually helped form the CIA. So the founder of American Studies is also a co-founder of the CIA itself. Right? And so the point about infiltration, sometimes I think, I mean, we can have that conversation because it's real. But sometimes it's moot. It's kind of a non-issue because the whole structure of the academy encourages us to produce these products that will be, archived behind a paywall and consumed in ways that are very useful for the national security state, even if you're doing super critical work, right? So one of the things I was always saying kind of to myself as I was writing Tip of the Spear is, man, I hope we study this book harder than they do. You know what I mean? That's sort of like, that was what I continued to tell myself. So I was like, damn, this could be really useful for our enemies potentially. Although they have a deeper memory of these things, but I don't know. The thing I was always telling myself is I hope we study it more than they do.
And you're right to be concerned about that, especially because, you know, you keep sharing, you know, in your social media and sometimes, I guess privately, some of the responses prisons, the state are offered about your book, like they are. So I hope, you know, they're at least, and they're trying to, at least in some way, stop people from studying it as much as they are. But you're right. That's and again, that's what I think was underneath all that Aaron Schwartz stuff. May he rest in power too. Because I think they were like, nah, bro, you're not going to tap in to start giving away all this research to people. That's not what we we fund you to do it for.
From what I understand, the number of people, the number of CIA employees is classified. It's not publicly available knowledge, but from what I understand, it's in the hundreds of thousands. I think that's right. That's right. And a lot of those people are journalists and literature people, and their job is just to read.
Yep.
Their job is just to read what comes out and to make reports about what's coming out, including fiction. You know, there's a book called FBI's, FB, and then eyes, like eyes, EYES. And that book's about the FBI, but it's about how all like so many of these guys who are in the FBI were like literature PhD people and writers, and you know, and that there's a whole sort of unit tasked with reading Black fiction, Black literature. Yeah, there it is, as a way to anticipate where we're going to be in the future, you know, like a kind of a speculative counterinsurgency practice, right? And
again, I keep pointing out that was Robert Redford's role in that Condor movie.
The Condor, that's a good movie. Yeah.
I liked it.
Yeah, exactly.
That was his job. He was like surveying.
Yeah.
Hey, that looks like something we read. He wrote a book about what we might be doing. That's it.
Yeah. So now I'm sure they got a whole teams of people watching YouTube.
Oh hell yeah, and producing
Twitter,
YouTube.
Producing YouTube, watching YouTube.
So just to point to what you mentioned at the end of this review is a little bit of an exchange from some folks who are mentioned in Saunders' book and Saeed's review, who basically wrote in, William Phillips in particular, to say Saunders and Saeed got it wrong, and saying Saeed maligned me, and then Saunders responds with receipts showing how Phillips was basically lying about what he did and didn't know in terms of what the CIA's support for his publication. And I thought that was it was a fascinating read. You got
and one of the guys isn't even like disagreeing. He's just like, yeah, we got some money from the CIA, but that doesn't mean that, that doesn't mean that it wasn't a good magazine or something like that.
Well, he was also saying it was just a small amount. He was saying it was just a few dollars. I don't know why and we need money to survive. If we get it from the CIA, so what? It was just because he says here it was only 5 to 10% of the budget. And which to me would mean, like when I read that, I'm thinking that's even more reason to reject it.
Right. Like if it's a small amount.
Yeah. It's just such a small amount. Why would I want the association if I'm claiming to be disassociated? Why would I,
Yeah, he's clearly being disingenuous.
Why would I risk it over, But yeah, and I for you know, I think about it all the time. If I was if I'm in the CIA and I have a budgeted office, I'm absolutely creating YouTube channels and podcasts, and I'm absolutely funding some fly black capitalists to talk about crypto and investment. Hell yeah. I honestly, I mean, like I'm like they must. I would just be having fun. I'd be out here messing with people all day long. I mean, you could.
I mean, I think a lot of them are too. They're just
Yeah.
because they're empowered. They can experiment. They're empowered to just experiment. I mean, that's, you know, a lot of the folks who were doing the kind of more grotesque mind control experiments and stuff like that. A lot of those folks were just doing it because they could. You know what I mean? Because, you know, the stuff I write about in Tip of the Spear was happening in the 70s, but they had been doing those experiments since at least the 50s. You could bring it back way earlier than that, but you know, but by the 70s, they're still doing the same experiments that they know kind of don't work already. So they're really just kind of doing it because they can't. They're these scientists who are empowered to do these kinds of things, and they do it because they can, you know.
So, well, let me ask you about that, because I read just shortly before that I remembered, but I went back and looked at some of the Carl Bernstein article from back in the day about the CIA and the press. Huh?
The Rolling Stone one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in that article, he says, you know, well, they claim they don't do this after 1973 anymore. And then he does kind of what you talked about, goes back and says, but in the 60s and the 50s, we could show all of this. He's got all these receipts and this, that, and the third. And it reminded me of, you know, I once asked Chris Simpson, the mass comm scholar that from American, at least I think he retired, but I remember asking him, so I said, you know, so your work in Science of Coercion shows all the receipts from the state's involvement in mass communication research going back to the 50s, 60s, 40s even. When do we find out about now? Like, you know, and his answer was kind of like, we're going to have to wait. It was almost kind of like one of those JFK things. We have to wait for a new wave of scholars to come out and do a new wave of research to dig in. So same thing with you. Like, I'm sure some of the claim is that, oh, the stuff that, you know, Ori and them write about, you know, I mean, yeah, we might have done that back in the day, but that's Attica. I mean, that's nowadays we don't do, you know. I know you talk a little bit about this, but is it illogical? I guess I'll ask it this way, to think none of this has stopped. They've just been more sophisticated, renamed, rebranded. I don't know. How do you?
It's a couple things, you know. The proliferation of these black sites, these CIA black sites, you know, like we don't know what's going on in those places, you know. So there's that, right? But that's speculative, it's conspiratorial, it's whatever. The thing that I'm always thinking of is that all of the things that, you know, these kind of like mind control scientists were trying to achieve is more or less achievable via Facebook and Instagram, like social media, right? So if you think about like in the 60s, what they were trying to, what kind of information and data they were trying to have about people. They wanted to know like where they were in terms of surveillance. They wanted to know who they knew. They wanted to know about their emotions. They wanted to know about their inner life, their desires. They wanted to know what they were thinking about, what they were reading. These social media platforms create a condition in which we kind of willingly give that information over, right? And we already have some evidence of wholesale kind of massive experimentation happening via social media. So 10 years ago, maybe there was that experiment where Facebook wanted to see if they could make everybody sad or something like that.
Yeah.
So they they just gave, you know, they just flooded everybody's feed with like negative information, and they were able to measure from the comments and interactions that a significant portion of the population was sad, right? So, I mean, we heard about that one. I don't know what else is going on, right? So that's the kind of, I mean, that's far beyond anything that the people who were involved in MK Ultra in the 60s could have dreamed of. I mean, that's what they were dreaming of, the ability to do what is now readily available. So I think a lot of this lives on now. You know, there's also Elon Musk's Neuralink project where he's he's doing the kind of electrode implantation that's happened successfully on a couple of people, and he's working on doing that with more people. And so, you know, because a lot of the research was not ethically sound, the findings of the sort of experiments that were happening on prisoners weren't published in peer-reviewed journals. They circulated, you know, it'd be interesting. I don't know for a fact how most of this stuff circulated, but a lot of it circulated through these kind of like memos, internal confidential memos, probably through word of mouth, probably existing in files that weren't reproduced, but that knowledge wasn't destroyed, right? The reason why we don't know a whole lot about MK Ultra is because the files were destroyed in 1973, the administrative files. But in terms of the research, we have no reason to, you know, believe that stuff was just destroyed. Because again, I mean, you know, MK Ultra, the CIA picked up where the Nazis left off. The originary trove of data that the CIA had to work up with as they developed those programs was the research that Nazis did on captives in concentration camps. And in many instances, they incorporated some of those same doctors, you know, they repatriated them to the United States, incorporated them into the apparatus and used that to develop, right? So, yeah, so I would say the black sites, I would say social media. I mean, these are where these things are happening.
Folks, see some of you are talking about audio problems, and my apology. I don't hear.
Oh, you can't hear me?
No, I hear you fine. They're saying that both of us were breaking up at different points, but I hear you fine. I don't hear any issues on this end, and on my little test window, I don't see any issues there either. So I'm. Some of you have reported it's fixed. But just be aware that I don't know what's going on. So I hope it's clear. Everything Ori just said sounded perfectly clear to me, but so we'll just, you know, press on here for a little while. Real quick, this question for you. Do you have any book recommendations for MK Ultra, drug use, mind control, psychiatry, psychology area? Really find that fascinating.
I think the singular one that I would recommend is probably The Poisoner in Chief, which is a fairly recent book. I can't believe the journalist, the author's name escapes my mind.
Oh, Sidney Gottlieb. I know that name.
Yeah, well, he was the head,
the subject,
of the
not the author. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen Kinzer.
Kinzer wrote a great book about Kinzer's the man. He wrote a great book about the Dulles brothers. He's written several really good books.
Boo.
And he
that.
generously let me pick his brain when I was considering going down this rabbit hole. I wanted to just talk to him about it and, you know, make sure that he didn't think that I was, you know, reaching. He was like, nah, sounds right. So I was like, all right, cool.
So I'm definitely interested in his work. Silberg co-signs, says the book is fantastic. Yipper, you're saying the audio is still messed up? That's wild, because I'm literally got a whole separate thing set up here and I don't hear anything.
Every time I come on here, I have some kind of technical issue.
Are you talking about the scratchiness? I did hear just a little scratch in my, but I don't hear anything in Ori. So I honestly don't know. Sorry about that, everybody. You're right. Not Amazon. Find another source. But the Sidney Gottlieb character, though. Oh man, why is it choppy? Pops and
Gottlieb,
clicks.
yeah,
Damn.
Gottlieb. He had a.
Well, I mean, he appears. So he's in my favorite documentary, Wormwood, because he's involved with the NSA drug control conspiracy.
He had CIA agents scouring the globe to find exotic poisons, one of which he planned to administer to Patrice Lumumba.
Yep.
Which didn't happen. I think he tried to drug Castro also.
Yep. Everywhere, and now that I've been introduced to his name, I recognize it. It's everywhere. He was involved with a lot of stuff.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You know, this is what I mean in terms of like experimentation, right? There's a certain class of people who are empowered. They just are like, you know, go wild, and then let us know what you find. You know. And he's one of these cats.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna. Dang, I'm disappointed. I see people still talking about the audio. I really don't know what to do about that.
It's both of ours?
I think so. Yeah, it's apparently scratchy or choppy, but I don't know how to address it because I don't know if I turn both of our mics down a little bit. Does that make a difference? If I put us down to 75. Does that help? Does anybody notice a difference now if I put us both at 75 as opposed to 100? Does that help make any difference? Anyway, a little 33 RPM popping doesn't hurt anybody. Yeah, right on. Let's take it back to the it's not a big thing. Sounds pretty good. Yeah, but anyway. So let me know if this little bit of a volume adjustment hurts or not. But and I appreciate you all saying it's not that bad. It is. It does bother me that it's happening. But yeah. Okay. So let me. So the only thing left that I had for us was those text messages from that you sent from this book. What is this book again? Catherine the Great, Catherine Graham and the Washington Post.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to talk a little bit about liberal counterinsurgency.
Yes, please go ahead. Yes.
And then I thought you said you wanted to talk about Tip of the Spear a little bit, but we could save that for.
I mean, I did. Well, I did, and then I did. I mean, I honestly I wasn't sure because I definitely. Well, one, I didn't have I didn't prepare for what I wanted to do for my class yet, so that was one thing. But then I thought I may have misread a text. I thought you were wanting to focus on something else, but
cool.
I got plenty. Listen, I got plenty. We can get to from the book. But I tell you what, make your point about liberal counterinsurgency and if it's related to this Catherine Graham thing, and then I'll at least ask one of the questions that I have.
Well, the Catherine Graham thing is really just is Operation Mockingbird, right? Operation Mockingbird is a CIA operation that's not confirmed, right? So if you were to look it up, it's listed as an alleged operation, right? Mm-hmm. The only thing that would change that is if the CIA admits to doing it, which it won't. So it's forever alleged. Yeah. You know, the reason why we know about MK Ultra is because somebody found some files that weren't destroyed years later, and so then they had to admit it, right? Operation Mockingbird was an effort to cultivate hundreds, if not thousands, of assets in the elite media, in the elite press, including the Washington Post. And that's what the book Catherine Great, the book Catherine the Great is about, the Washington Post. And there's a couple pages there about Operation Mockingbird and just the sheer scope of that operation, and the extent of CIA involvement in shaping narratives in the Washington Post and the New York Times and Reader's Digest elsewhere, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm just pulling up one of them here, where let's see, he wanted something more. That is Wisner, who ends up working with Philip Graham, it says here, but he wanted something more, a way not to subvert and disrupt, but to give foreign peoples a sense of America, to alter their perceptions against communism without violence. And the publisher Philip Graham helped conceive of a formal program to recruit and use journalists for that objective. Intelligence agencies had used journalists before many times in many countries, but the practice had until then remained rather haphazard. This, however, was to be a formal program structured and run accordingly to high-level policy. The program had the code name Operation Mockingbird. Was the CIA's response, and it was in this part. I've certainly never read about it. I don't know if I've even come across it. The CIA's response to a propaganda body called the International Organization of Journalists, which had been founded in Copenhagen in 1946, and which Wisner had learned had been taken over by communists. And their goal was, of course, to use the press to promote communist logic.
Yep. And so the dude I talked about earlier, Edward Hunter was a Mockingbird operative, right? And so, like I said, his claim to fame was that he introduced the term brainwashing into circulation. And of course, brainwashing was framed as a communist menace, that required, the U.S. population to mobilize its forces to defend itself against this communist menace, right? And so he developed that, knowing that the U.S. at that exact moment was actually doing what it said that it was defending itself against, right? So that's just an example of that.
So I don't mean to make light of this comment, but MK Ultra is real.
So let me say, MK Ultra, I use that term really lightly. Okay, it's a cryptonym. So MK Ultra is the most widely known term for a whole range of different programs that changed over time. All right. So there's MK Ultra, there's MK Search, there's Mockingbird, there's so many of them, and I lose track of them. I use MK Ultra lightly in the same way that people use COINTELPRO to describe, a wide range of programs that sometimes preceded or followed or ran concurrent with COINTELPRO. That's how. But yes, MK Ultra, when it was launched in the 1950s, CIA director Alan Dulles said that it was part of the CIA's comprehensive brain warfare project. And they used, chemical, biological, mechanical, various techniques to see if they could obliterate human consciousness, develop create new forms of consciousness, and to control behavior. And they did all kinds of, they connected people to remote control devices and tried to, operate them by remote control. They gave people drugs. They did electroshock therapy, and a lot of this precedes MK Ultra. Like, I've got letters between J. Edgar Hoover and a psychologist named George Estabrooks in the 1930s, where George Estabrooks was like, yo, if you want to, I can hypnotize people and convince them to plant bombs places and do all kind of things in the 30s. And Hoover was like, yeah, let me have you come to the FBI headquarters and you can tell me more.
My bad. I remember I saw this a couple of weeks ago, months ago. This is my favorite.
Yeah.
Set up brothels and safe houses to get people set up in sex scandals and stuff.
Yeah.
Midnight Climax.
And the people who were watching that.
And there goes Sydney again.
Class, and they were so enthralled that they didn't even want to get up to go to the bathroom. So they had toilets installed so they could go number 2 while they're watching, people have sex and be drugged against their will. Yeah, that's Midnight Climax. That was in San Francisco. Yeah.
It is like
another one that's a little further off the rails and is not as well documented, but worth a read, called Chaos. And that's about the Manson murders and Charles Manson's connection and the connection of Charles Manson's handlers to the CIA. Right. So you've got Manson, you've got
Ted Kaczynski.
Oh, well, if you listen, if you want to do that, there's a listen. I was just gonna say yes. Okay. I was gonna say, in terms of the close of the 60s, the long 60s, and how that moment of rebelliousness comes to an end, right? It's Manson, it's the Symbionese Liberation Army.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And it's Jim Jones.
That's right.
In Guyana. Now, if one were to look into each of these instances with an eye towards the links between these instances and American intelligence agencies, one might find many things. And as you just said with Kaczynski, if you wanted to extend that duration, there are
even that Netflix series about him goes into that, and that dude
it mentions
Harvard,
it. Yeah, he was the subject of experiments for sure.
That they mess with him, and I've never looked into it, but I at least one person I've always trusted their authority on this stuff talked to me years ago about the Jim Jones thing, and it's according to him way more complicated than we've been told, it even made me suspicious when I saw some recent
word I would use.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
I mean, it's I don't know. Let's go with complicated.
So there was a recent Maggie Netflix, I think it was Netflix, Hulu, one of these. I think there's even been a couple of them, series on Jim Jones.
Yeah,
and
I think there's a movie coming out.
Yeah,
right as there's more interest in what is kind of like people want to call it conspiracy theorizing, which there's evidence to suggest that the CIA helped to introduce that term, conspiracy theory, right, as a way to delegitimize criticism of the Warren Commission report. Like there's a memo circulating with the CIA said, okay, let's use the term conspiracy theory to malign people who don't think that the Warren Commission report on JFK is accurate, right? So there's some evidence there, right? I think conspiracies get a bad name, right? All conspiracies aren't equal, right?
Right.
If you're engaged in concerted action and trying to keep that action a secret, then you're engaged in a conspiracy. So conspiracies are happening all the time. And there's also counter conspiracies that are happening, right? I mean, there's different competing factions that are engaging in, how do you draw the line between a conspiracy and just organize it, right? I mean, it's like it's a porous boundary. But there's this kind of also this subfield called the parapolitics, where people are thinking about increasingly. I mean, there's a growing community of people on the left, right? Because obviously we hear a lot about the right-wing conspiracy discourse, right? But there's a kind of like Marxist inflected leftist community of people who are thinking about, you know, thinking about American political development in ways that don't privilege, you know, democratic processes, in ways that look at, you know, how people are, how intelligence agencies and organized crime and the sort of like national security state are intertwined with one another, right? So as people are asking more and more of these questions, we're seeing more and more films about these figures that emerge that don't actually engage in that part of the narrative. And so I saw some of the stuff on Jim Jones, and it didn't get into any, but you know, like it's a whole other conversation. But yeah, there's much to look at there for sure.
Did y'all see the Trump official who's going to call in the folks from the Warren Commission to give testimony? No, I did not see that. Have you heard about that one?
I've heard that, and I've heard about, you know, the declassification of the JFK files and the MLK files and all of that stuff. So that'll be interesting.
So Trump's going to blow the lid off of that for us?
He's going to blow the whole lid off. Full transparency.
Listen, as we start to head towards to wrapping up, so listen, one of the things you mentioned, you said on page 121, you're quoting Roger Champion, an elected spokesman of the Attica Rebellion, who describes the effect of the massacre as a psychological operation that was performed on those boys. Some got killed, something happened to those guys. They're not the same kind of people no more. I don't know what happened to them, but they're not here. His use of the phrase psychological operation has military and medicalized connotations, suggesting that Attica was at once a counterinsurgency psyop and a kind of surgical procedure that altered people such that they remained living but were no longer there. I don't have a question formed properly right now for that, but it feels like there's something. And then you go in, that chapter is really, again, I mean, I commend you for the whole thing, obviously, but that chapter is brutal. I guess pun intended. Maybe more so, I don't know if this is like a personal confession of sorts, but I really struggle reading it and rereading that chapter. And I keep thinking I'm rereading it because I want to ask you a question. There's a way to phrase the question that I want to ask that I haven't figured out yet. I even have scribbled attempts at writing it down. But sort of in line with what we've been talking about tonight, and as a way to talk about whatever else you would want to say about your book or whatever. They really are using any and every mechanism, from what we like to listen to, what we like to eat, who we want to have sex with, how we conceive our sexual identity. I mean, every single thing is being used to manipulate people, ultimately to get us not to rebel. If I'm over, I don't know, man. I'm sorry, man.
Yeah,
I'm not really prepared in this moment.
No. I can say something about that.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So the first thing is, like, it took me a really long time to understand that the whole argument of the book boils down to what Queen Mother Moore says at the beginning. I start the book with a speech she gave in Greenhaven Prison, and that speech is in 1973. And in an initial version of the book, I had it later in the book where it actually appears chronologically. So that would have been maybe the intro to chapter 5 or something like that. But then over time, I realized, like, this is actually, like, she's identified, like, the core of the struggle, right? And she's the intro to the book is about her telling everyone, it's like, there's she's talking about science. There's a science of white supremacy, she says. And the whole goal of that science is to turn you into a Negro. Like, you're an African, and they've turned you into a Negro, right? I mean, and we're familiar with this. Malcolm said this. Lots of people have said this, right? But I think that for me eventually became the core of it. Once the totality of all the different methods that were used came into focus for me, I realized that was really what it was about. I mean, the other person who talked about it, and we should always lift up his name, was Imam Jamil Al-Amin, formerly known as H. Rap Brown, and his book Die Nigger Die, which is a book about anti-Black genocide. Part of how the genocide is unfolding, according to him, is again turning Black people into Negroes, destroying that nationalist consciousness. And so I think that's really the core of it. For chapter 4, I struggled with different ways to write that chapter. And ultimately, the argument that I was trying to make, and maybe I wasn't successful, is that what happened in terms of the sexual violence is not reducible to strategy. So what you're saying, what you just said, Jared, is true, that they'll use any method to get us to stop rebelling. That's true, but that's not actually what the chapter is about. The chapter is actually about how much they need us to occupy the position. So it's actually not about us. It's really about white consciousness, white masculine consciousness, and the extent to which it's premised on, specifically in this case, Black male subjugation, right? And the thing that kept ringing in my mind, and I cite Baldwin a lot in that chapter, because Baldwin talks about, in the letter to his nephew, he talks about, like, imagine if you look up at the sky and the stars are out of place, right? Or something like, he said it more beautifully than that, obviously. And so there's a kind of a mania. There's a mania that happens, right? There's something that's happening that's beyond strategic. And that's sort of what I wanted to, because the book is really about counterinsurgency, but I didn't want to over rationalize everything and make it seem like everything is strategic, because it's not. And in this case, it was like mania, like they lost it. And part of why they lost it is like, and I try to say this in the book, it's like, in this instance, the whole town of Attica only exists because the prison is there. That's the only reason why that town exists as a town. There used to be like Bethlehem still used to be there. It's not there no more. It's just Attica, right? So if you think about, like, traditional gender roles and like how men come to understand themselves as men through their labor and providing, right? So if the prison goes up and there's no more prison, there's no more town, there's no more manhood, there's no more nuclear family, there's none of that. It throws their whole identity into crisis. And their response to that was to reassert a pathological white masculinity through really intense ritualized forms of sexual violence, which I think tells us a lot about the kinds of men that we're dealing with, right? And so that's sort of what I wanted to highlight.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. You're right. I appreciate the correction of my focus on what the chapter is and is not doing.
There's a strategy element, but it was almost too easy.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to, the initial versions was like, oh yeah, like, okay. But then I was like, nah, if you just focus on strategy, there's actually a lot that gets left out. A lot of that stuff just doesn't have a rational explanation. And so it also calls the whole founding myth of the white man as this hyper rational being, it throws all of that into crisis.
Yeah, yeah. And then the letter, is it just the one letter?
Oh, from Casper. But let me mention this because we did talk about this, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I talked about, and because again, a lot of this is not, I mean, I don't know how much of this is operating on a conscious level, right? But like, I spend a lot of time talking about the cover of this report.
Yeah.
The McKay Commission report, which is supposed to be the most, sort of rigorous, objective accounting of the rebellion and the massacre, right? Before this other book, Blood in the Water, came out, that was the one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, it's even more. It's even more useful as a primary source document because it featured interviews of people who were there, like right after it happened. Right. And of course, they choose as the cover of the book this image of the men being tortured, totally naked, full frontal nudity. I can't think of another. It was released as a mass market paperback, and I can't think of another book that I've ever seen that features an image like that. It's such a violent image. And I did painstaking research on it, and no one had ever commented on this image, right? And so the dehumanization of these men was so normalized that even in this product that was supposed to be critiquing the state for its quote unquote excessive violence, uses as its cover what is clearly a slave coffle with full frontal nudity on it, right? And so I'm thinking of like, imagine just reading that book and holding it, like back when people read books, you're sitting in public, just holding the book open and people are seeing that. Like, what is happening there? It was pretty profound for me. So I spent some time really thinking about that. And I'm teaching a class right now on archival research. And I wanted my students to look at that report, not necessarily for the cover, but just because we were doing an activity about Attica and research methods. So I wanted students to look at the cover. I don't include that image in the book, by the way, because I didn't want to reproduce that violence, right? It's there. If you want to see it, you can Google it. But the New York State Library took the cover off of the version of the book that they have online. And because in prepping for my class, I put a link to it, and the first page is just blank. And I was like, wait a minute, I don't think it was like that. And I went back and looked at my version, which I downloaded years ago, and the image is there. So I need to send them an email because I'm making an assumption that they read my book or heard about what I said and just took the image off. Which, if that's true, that's peak liberalism. Like, that's insane. We're talking about an archive that's supposed to preserve things as they are for posterity. So what they should have done is to add a note contextualizing this.
Right.
Not just eliminate it completely, which to me totally changes the meaning of the document. The cover is what helps us understand the real meaning of that document. And it really reminds me of this is the post-truth era. This is changing the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's crazy that you could just delete an image in an archival repository like that. So I owe them an email because I'm going to need an explanation.
Yeah, and definitely let us know what the response is, because I think that's and you're all of that is right. All of that is right. Anybody, any quick questions, comments for Ori before we wrap up for the evening? And
let me just make my little point about liberal counterinsurgency real quick.
Yeah, keep going. I'm not trying to rush you, by the way. I've just run out, and I think I'm just Go ahead, but go ahead, please.
Past your
Take your
bedtime.
time.
I am.
I
too,
am
man.
definitely
Listen,
past my bedtime.
Me
but,
too.
But,
Listen, I'm only up this late for you, man. I do my best thinking in the morning. I'm
I
with you.
agree.
Listen, 100%. Listen.
But there's no Saturday morning live.
Listen, Saturday at 5 a.m. That's me, man. I'll be ready.
That's what I'm saying.
No, I mean, I'm thinking, because I saw some of your recent videos on liberal counterinsurgency, which I've enjoyed. And I'm, it just seems to me that what we're experiencing with the Trump regime is actually an attack on liberal counterinsurgency. And I just think that it's, I think we just need to think about it that way, right? So like, like if we think about, for instance, USAID, right, which is established in right. I mean, let's be real. I mean, it's established in 1961 by JFK, which I think is the same year that he starts to use the term counterinsurgency, right? And it was developed to stem the tide of communism across the third world, right? And in the first instance, we, like Western imperialism is largely responsible for creating the political and economic conditions that then need to be ameliorated through aid, right? So via, regime change, structural adjustment, XYZ, you create these conditions and then you provide the aid. With conditions, of course, right? Conditional aid, and is designed to promote dependency and to dissuade militant forms of intervention. The idea of aid as a weapon is perfectly encapsulated by the horrifying image of the aid literally crushing people in Gaza, killing I think 5 children, right? I mean, that's the emblem of aid as a weapon, right? So this isn't to say that aid is bad, obviously, right? But it's a weapon, right? And this is like the same dynamic that I lay out in Tip of the Spear on a much smaller scale in terms of how prison reform and the use of the dispensation of privileges is then used as a weapon that can be withdrawn, right? So this is the dynamic, right? And we can think of, like,
said in South Africa, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so there's Dan Mitrone. People might remember Dan Mitrione was a CIA operative who was teaching people torture techniques in Uruguay in order to defeat the Tupamaros, a revolutionary movement in Uruguay. He was kidnapped by the Tupamaros, and they were trying to develop a prisoner exchange program, and it didn't happen, and they executed him, right? He was kidnapped in July of 1970, by the way, a few days before Jonathan Jackson's raid on the Marin County Courthouse, a few days before the Long Attica Revolt starts. And this is why later Nelson Rockefeller makes the connection between the tactics that are being used in Latin America, where he had economic interests and a whole intelligence gathering apparatus in Latin America and Attica and New York, where he was governor, right? Because these things were happening at the same time and they were using the same tactics. Mitrione's cover as a CIA in Uruguay was USAID. He was a USAID officer. Similar to the guy I talked about, I think the first time I was on this program, what's his name? Donald Bordenkercher, who developed counterinsurgency tactics in California prisons and in Vietnam and in Abu Ghraib. Worked with the FBI and the CIA. He was in Vietnam under USAID. So this isn't to say USAID is all bad or that everything USAID does is bad, but it's a liberal counterinsurgency apparatus that was developed to help bolster consent and investment, right? And so that's what's under attack. That apparatus is under attack from the hard right. I mean, DEI is under attack. DEI is liberal counterinsurgency. We know this, right? We know that it's used by the ruling class to stabilize imperial power by assimilating marginalized groups into positions of relative authority in the hopes that their ascendance will obscure the conditions of naked violence, or even encourage people to want to advance within that structure and like become an overseer, right? So DEI has always come under fire from the left, and we've always critiqued it as liberal counterinsurgency. It's really similar to like the indirect rule, the system of indirect rule by like the British Empire and others. The Department of Education, that's liberal counterinsurgency. I mean, we've known that since at least Carter G. Woodson, right? I mean, right? The education system is a site of political struggle. We know that. When you can control a man's thinking, you don't have to worry about his actions. That's Carter G. Woodson. That's a quote, right?
The schoolhouse was meant to replace the stability lost with the demise of the plantation.
There it is.
Donald Spivey.
There it is. You know, any socially conscious Black person with a child in public school understands that at some level, the education system is structured as anti-Black counterinsurgency. I mean, the work that me and my wife have to do with my child, my 13-year-old, when he comes home from school is intense. So we've always recognized that it was a site of struggle. So these things that are actually weapons against us, but that are weapons that incorporate aspects of consensual and hegemonic power, inducement, right? That don't rely on naked violence. Those are the things that are under attack, because we are now subject to a regime that is so confident in its ability to dominate that it feels that it doesn't need to manufacture consent in the same way, that it can just rely on naked violence and repression and fear. And so I think that's kind of where we are.
So what do you think that this is? What do you think this will mean then? Do you think that there will be some conflict among the ruling elite who want to say we like our liberal counterinsurgency tactics? Do you think that there will also be a sort of attendant decline in the political consciousness of our communities and audiences who are going to be sort of, you know, roped back in by being encouraged to re-engage the fight to protect the liberal counterinsurgent efforts? What do you think?
Yeah,
because since you texted me that, I told you I need to let that marinate, and I did. I had to let sit with that for a minute and drive around and think about that. Like,
no, obviously, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I think there's definitely going to be. I mean, the fights are already happening. That's why Trump has installed all these loyalists who will do his bidding. I mean, there are people who are dissenting, right? The question is, you know, the issue is that obviously we on the left haven't been able to build the capacity to meet our own needs outside of these structures, right? So they did provide a terrain of struggle. And this is why I've been really happy that you've been talking about Stuart Hall lately, because Hall is like a premier interpreter of Antonio Gramsci and this idea of the war of position, right? So like the Department of Education is a site of a war of position, right? It's a terrain of struggle that's abstracted from the actual, it's abstracted from the actual moment or the actual goal of actually seizing control of the state. But it's a terrain of struggle where we can fight over, you know, creating spaces for doing, you know, because obviously there's lots of teachers and school administrators who are doing amazing work within the Department of Education, right? And so I think the opportunities for that kind of struggle are being narrowed. And so it's going to force us to think really seriously about the need to develop independent alternatives, because these spaces are going to be much less hospitable to that kind of work. It was tolerated before in some cases, and I think it will be less so.
Man. And then 4 years from now, we're going to be being told, get your representation back by voting for.
Yeah.
And again, I got to shout Renee out for that too, because when she showed the point about, you know, at least with Target, DEI over the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years or more has only resulted in the most marginal, nominal, quote unquote, gains for Black or anybody else. I mean, it's like a handful of, and there was even a drop in overall employment with the rise of DEI at Target. All that Black people got was like 3% more representation on the board.
Yo, I got like 3 or 4 friends who, like that's how they feed their families is DEI. You know what I'm saying? They're DEI consultants, you know, and these are solid people, and they know the critiques of DEI. You know what I'm saying? Like they're not dupes.
A couple of years ago, I was a colleague of mine switched his career up and got a fat gig in academia doing DEI stuff. And
I mean, there's the people who are like making mad bank, but I'm just talking about like just jobs. You know what I'm saying? Just
no, I know. Well, but my only point was to agree with you. Like he's clear. Yeah. Like this is not some revolutionary thing. He was like, this is a nice little hustle though. Yeah. I'm gonna work it because my regular academic career wasn't doing anything. Yeah. So yeah, but you're right. Yeah, that's still doing too much. Brittany, I wasn't what I do. I don't know. I wasn't co-signing it. I was just acknowledging. Like people recognize that this isn't real, but they also saw it as I don't know. All right. Josh is asking, has Tip of the Spear made its way into any other jails or prisons? I know it was banned in California. Any updates on that?
I haven't. I get letters all the time from people. I mean, I got an email from someone recently who was in Pennsylvania who said that the book was banned, but she also said that her and her loved one are halfway through the process of she's reading it to him over the phone, which I just was like deeply moved by that.
Yeah.
So this is the whole point I was making in the letter in response. It's like, y'all don't know how this works. Like you can ban it, but like you can't. Censorship doesn't actually work. If people want something, they'll get it. They'll find a way to get it, right? So New York, Florida, California, Pennsylvania. We also have to understand, like, you know, the people who are doing the censorship, these are just regular people who are like, you know, it's like they make, you know, there's openings. There's openings.
I don't know when I can get Todd and Ori to combo.
We got to get back on when comes back out.
Andor season 2, right?
Andor,
yeah. Okay, that was what I was thinking.
I'm trying not to be too excited.
Me too, because I went back and was watching season 1. When is season 2 supposed to drop?
I don't know.
Yeah. But that might be it. You know, look, you know, I try to tell people, you know, not everybody is as anxious as people like me to be on camera. Some folks out here doing real work. Ori's one of them. Todd's another one. I can't just grab folks whenever I want. Otherwise it would be, you know, they wouldn't be doing nothing else but hanging out over here. So we gotta spread folks out. You gotta give people a chance here to do other areas of their work. Okay, so Andor season 2 will arrive April 22nd.
Oh man, that's still a long time.
That's a long way away. So we'll see I'll see if I could get Todd and Ori to do a preview. Maybe we could do a recap of season 1.
And Erica.
Got to get Erica. I'm always trying, Maggie. Just understand, I'm always trying. I'm always endeavoring to get folks back on here. It's It's always their fault. People got families and jobs. It's ridiculous out here. It's ridiculous. But Ori, so to me, this gathering does not count as the interview I want to do for my class about your book. I do need to organize some thoughts.
This was it for me, homie, but all right, cool. I thought this was it.
All right, so I'll edit this and try to stretch it. But as I was saying to Maggie and others, I'll be trying to get you to come back through with a specific set of questions again, and then if not that, at least for Andor season 2. Enough time to plan. I'm not the influencer. Well, yeah, of the group. Yeah, I'm the low budget influencer of the group. Yeah, I'm the one trying to. What is this? I got into a tit for tat today, and somebody, when they reminded me shizlib about the live stream genocide. Oh, I'm sorry. I misread this. I thought this was sorry about this. I thought it was going to be a question. 2Fs is venting. But anyway, Ori, I definitely appreciate you coming through to hang out tonight and do this anytime. I've been enjoying these Saturday dusk lives. It's wild to think that once upon a time I would have just been getting ready to go out, and now it's like the night is long over. So, but listen. Big salute to you, Ori. Big shout out to all the people in the chat who were able to make it live. To those who will see and hear this later, thanks and peace to you as well. But only if you're willing to fight for it. As Fred Hampton used to say, please do check the link in the show description if you have not already caught up with Ori's work and his book, Tip of the Spear. Please make sure you grab a copy and dig deep. And otherwise, Andor season 2. Peace if you're willing to fight for it. Catch you next time right here at.
And what do you sacrifice?
Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago for which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, that set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything.
I mix what I like.
But this particular situation, out of many situations that I didn't